Merilyn, once fluoride chemicals are added to the water supply, how can their dosage and side effects be monitored adequately, and if you could include the difference between concentration and dose for the viewers?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the concentration is just the amount of fluoride that they put into the water, and it's not rocket science to be able to measure the concentration, so they can control that fairly well within a certain range. But there's absolutely no control over the dose, because the amount of water you drink determines how much fluoride you get. People who are outdoor workers, people who are athletes, they can drink a lot more water, and they can drink, my nephew was a geologist, and he used to drink 10 litres of water every day when he was out on the job. So he was getting 10 times the dose as someone who drinks 1 litre of water a day. The people who've got impaired kidney function, they effectively get a higher dose because they can't excrete it in their urine. So there's no control over the dose, so there's no control over monitoring, because they don't bother. Most doctors don't even realise that there can be side effects from the ingestion of fluoride, so they don't even know what to look for.
Perhaps you could then, given this knowledge that you've imparted, could you explain how mothers are going to monitor the dose of fluoride for their little babies, especially for those that can't breastfeed? They have to use infant formulas, and they obviously have to mix it. And I have seen reports where mothers feel that it's safe for them to boil the water in order for it to be sterile. What does this do to fluoride concentrations? Could you expand a little bit about the whole infant dosage?
Yeah. Well, first of all, boiling will only concentrate the amount of fluoride in the water. It's extremely hard to get rid of out of water. Most filters, carbon filters particularly is what most people use, won't remove it. The only type of filter that will remove it is a reverse osmosis filter, and they can be $500-600 upwards. With mothers, they have been misled because they have been told that it's quite safe to add fluoridated water to infant formula, and this is completely wrong. The amount of fluoride in fluoridated water, there is a tiny amount of fluoride in breast milk. It's like 0.004 parts per million. It's a minute amount. The amount of fluoride in fluoridated water is 250 times the amount that would be in breast milk. So nature's actually trying to keep babies away from fluoride. But mothers haven't been told this. The American Dental Association in 2006 started warning that if babies were going to be fed with infant formula reconstituted with tap water, it would be wise to use non-fluoridated tap water.
But we've been told that it's perfectly safe to use, so it seems to me a little strange that we've been told that it's safe, but it clearly isn't. Have you any thoughts on why they would tell us it's safe? Clearly the science shows otherwise.
Australian mothers, the Australian public, have been deliberately misled by fluoridation promoters in Australia.
Why do you think this is?
Because they do not want to stop water fluoridation, and they're deliberately putting children at risk of developing dental fluorosis because they do not want to stop water fluoridation. They want to continue their program.
In 2007, the National Health and Medical Research Council released a report titled A Systematic Review of the Efficacy and Safety of Fluoridation. According to Professor Paul Connett, Emeritus Professor of Environmental Chemistry, St. Lawrence University, USA, the NHMRC report, quote, is being cited around the fluoridating world as the final word on safety and effectiveness of water fluoridation. However, as far as addressing health concerns, a careful reading of this report indicates that at best it is a work of professional incompetence, or at worst an example of scientific fraud, in which scientific information is manipulated to support a preordained conclusion. End of quote. These are strong words. It would seem that not all scientists agree that water fluoridation is completely, quote, safe and effective. What are your views, Merilyn, on the NHMRC report, and do you believe it addresses all fluoridation health concerns adequately?
No, I think it's a piece of garbage actually. I personally told the head of the NHMRC, Warwick Anderson, when he was in Brisbane a couple of years ago, there was a really crappy report. I honestly believe that because it was basically based on the York University report of 2000, which was fine. They didn't do any more work on it. They only added in bits on salt fluoridation and milk fluoridation, which is not about water fluoridation. They never once looked at the effect of the cumulative effect of fluoride on people with kidney impairment, and yet through freedom of information we know that that was part of the tender, that they were required to look at the effect of fluoride on people with a kidney impairment. They didn't do it. There was not a word in the final report. They also only just barely touched on thyroid effects, and that they said that fluoridation did not cause thyroid cancer. They never once touched on the effects that fluoride can decrease thyroid activity, and they have known this for 100 years. There's hundreds and hundreds of scientific publications linking fluoride to decreasing thyroid activity. Not a word in the NHMRC report.
So what words of warning would you say to, first of all, the viewers, and then secondly, perhaps the authorities?
Do a proper review. Actually look at people. Do the health and safety studies that have never been done. Do it properly. Do it decently.
And you're talking about independent studies that have no vested interests involved?
Yes, exactly. This was a privately contracted review, and I think it had a preordained result. Even the name of the report, the safety and efficacy of fluoridation, they never found it was safe, and it's certainly not effective.
And what about words of warning to viewers? What should they be doing to help themselves?
Minimise your exposure to fluoride. It's extremely difficult to avoid all exposure, but drink natural spring water, drink reverse osmosis water. Be careful of what processed foods would have a high liquid content that would contain fluoride. For mothers, make up baby formula with non-fluoridated water. As I said, it's extremely difficult to avoid all contact with it, but you can minimise your exposure. I'd just like to point out one thing. These are fluoride tablets. They're 1/4 of a milligram tablet. They're made by Colgate, and they're actually made in the US of A. This is a normal glass of water. It's 1/4 of a litre of water, 250 mils. When you drink a glass of fluoridated water, you are getting 1 tablet for every glass of water that you drink. If you don't choose to be medicated, and they are medicating us through our water, then you have to go and do what you can to avoid it. You have to outlay a lot of money and expense. If you go to a restaurant, you are having foods prepared with fluoridated water. It's extremely difficult to avoid it. Totally.
Just going into what you've just put 1 tablet in a glass of water, what does that work out? So they say that 1 part per million, which is 1 milligram per litre.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So if people drink, say, 4 glasses of water, how much are they actually receiving?
You're receiving 4 tablets.
Which is how much?
A milligram.
1 milligram.
Yes.
So 4 glasses, you've already got your dose.
Yes. So if you drink 2 litres of water, you are getting twice the dose. If you drink 4 litres of water a day, or you have numerous cups of tea or coffee, fruit juice, so many things are made up with fluoridated water, you are getting a much higher dose.
And this is an accumulative
Yes.
chemical.
It depends on your kidney function. People who are young and healthy, a healthy kidney function, they can only excrete about 50% of the fluoride that they ingest through their urine. The rest of it accumulates in their bones.
Why does Dr. Carney ignore the World Health Organisation's advice that before fluoridation is begun, an estimate be made of the total fluoride dose children are already receiving? And I'll just state that quote, Dental and public health administrators should be aware of the total fluoride exposure in the population before introducing any additional fluoride program for caries prevention, unquote. And that's a 1994 WHO recommendation. Could you please answer?
They've never done that. They have never done that anywhere in Australia, even though the NHMRC several years ago said that that should be done. Fluoride intake studies should be done. It has never been done in Australia anywhere. And they've never done a health risk assessment.
So what would you say to these authorities that are ignoring the recommendations of the World Health Organisation's
Well, I
reports?
feel that they're all criminals, actually.
So what would you as a scientist say to politicians and maybe other doctors and scientists who haven't got the spine to stand up with you and fight this?
Well, it's extremely unscientific for a start, what they have done. And I wonder what the real agenda is, because we know that water fluoridation does cause harm to vulnerable members of the community. We do know that it's not effective. There's only been 2 adult health surveys ever done in Australia. The first one was 20 years ago. The second one was released a couple of years ago. When you actually go into the individual state and territory reports of that adult dental survey, you find, and it's basically in the fine print, that the dental health of adults in Queensland, which has only had basically Townsville, Mareeba and Dalby fluoridated, which is less than 5% of the population, they have exactly the same amount of tooth decay, no more, than all the adults in all the other states. It hasn't made any difference. It's not effective. When you look at all the children's dental surveys, by the time children are at age 12 years of age, children in Queensland are just the same as children in the other states. It doesn't make any difference. It is not effective. There is a small difference. Part of that can be explained by tooth delay eruption, which isn't taken into account in dental surveys.